Hello and welcome to Elite Week, episode 29, Saturday, August 8th, 2020. I am here interviewing Mack Winston. He is the editor-in-chief of Sag-I Magazine. He is a inflatable guest at Lave Radio, and he is one of the fleet commanders of the East India Trading Company. We're recording this pre-record interview Saturday, and it will be released on Monday. So that's August the 10th. So look for it then, and I hope you enjoy it. Hello, and welcome, Mack. How are you today?
I'm absolutely phenomenal.
Life is good. Let's go ahead and get this started, right?
Yeah.
There we go.
I don't have any beer. Oh no.
All right, we're gonna pause the recording right now for Mack to go get a beer.
Actually, it'd probably be a cup of tea. I had a bit too much to drink last night, if the truth be known.
Fair. So then that might be okay. That today's a coffee day. That's all good.
Yeah. What tea in this house?
Tea, of course. Proper tea for someone in that area of the world. Although you aren't in the United Kingdom, but you are surrounded by the United Kingdom. Yeah,
kind of islands on one side, but yeah, I live in a place that, well, it depends where anybody in the UK has probably heard of the Isle of Man, but further afield you might not have, because it's kind of a small island. If you're a motorcyclist, you will have heard of it for the TT races. But yeah, it's not that outside of bikers ain't that well known.
But I mean, you are surrounded by the United Kingdom, right? You've got England on the right and Scotland on the, or not Scotland, Ireland on the left.
Yeah, the Republic of Ireland is directly west of us. Northern Ireland, which is, because there's two bits. Ireland, you got the on the island of the UK is the British Isles is complicated. In fact, somebody did a really nice YouTube video of it, which I don't know, you might be able to find it and link it. But you've got, on the island of Ireland, you have the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland, which is the UK. So you've essentially got two nations there.
On that island, yeah.
And then to the north, we've got Scotland. To the south, we got Wales. And to the east, we've got England.
Yes. So, just the short version, the Cliff Notes version, for anybody who hasn't seen that video is, once upon a time, a long time ago, there were a bunch of British dicks that fucked over everybody and took a lot of land.
Yes. In fact, what they say, if you go to the top of the mountain, which is Snaith Fell, which means snow mountain, it comes from a Norse word. The Isle of Man is kind of half Celtic and half Norse. The Vikings only got about halfway down before the Celts beat them off. So the south of the island tends to all be Celtic names, and the north tends to all be Viking names. But you go up to Snaith Fell, and you stand there. They say on a nice day, which actually today it's absolutely glorious sunshine today, and about 18 degrees Celsius, which is, I don't know what that is in freedom units, but somewhere in the 60s, I think. Yeah. So it's a really nice day. Visibility. In fact, I was out earlier today and I could see from the Calf Sound, I could see the mountains of Mourne in Northern Ireland quite clearly. But if you go to the top of Snaith Fell, I'm still trying to get to my original point. You go to the top of the Snaith Fell, you can see 6 kingdoms: England, Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, and of course the Kingdom of Man, which is what you're actually standing on. So yeah, there's an electric railway which goes up Snaith Fell. If you have been to Colorado and gone on that, there's a railway which goes up Pikes Peak. It's like the Pikes Peak Railway, except not quite as high, and it's electric and it's narrow gauge. But yeah. It's thanks to COVID, it's not been running because we don't have any tourists.
Well, you had a couple like a week back from the Guernseyians. Yeah,
we had them come up from the Channel Islands. We've got flights going to Guernsey at the moment, so we actually had some wild tourists. And they one of them said the funniest thing is, because it's a really slow news day, so one of them said something in the airport, and the whole day, like Manx Radio was like interviewing this guy. But later on there was something in the papers which said it was like a report. Yeah, the Guernsey tourists, were saying, "Oh, the people in the Isle of Man are so nice," which was a bit of a surprise to us. We thought you might all be a bit strange.
So coming from a Guernseyan. Okay,
Yes.
fair.
I was going to say, it takes one to know one.
Yeah. All right, so now that we've educated a bunch of Americans on what the Isle of Man is, and now they're frantically looking around on the map for the Isle of Woman, let's dive in.
It's Man from Manannan MacClure, who was the god of the Isle of Man. It's not man as in male person. In Spanish it's La Isla de Man, so it's not La Isla de Hombre. So anyway,
although I think that was a Village People album. So yeah. All right, moving on. Let's talk about you, Mac. How did you first?
My favorite subject.
Yeah, man. How did you first come to Elite Dangerous? And tell me a little bit of your history with the game.
Okay, so a long time ago, I was a young teenager, and we had BBC Micros in our school with disk drives. So we were really something that, I mean, most people had tapes, but our school BBC Micro had a disk drive. And somebody brought this game in called Elite, the BBC Micro disc version, which it had a little bit more than the tape version, because you can, with the tape version, you had 30. BBC Micro has 32K of RAM, out of which some was taken up by the frame buffer, the bit that holds the memory that holds the picture that's showing on the screen. So there's not much memory left over for program and data and what have you once you got a graphics screen up. So the disc version was a bit better because it could load things off the floppy disk as you played, and it also came with a book called The Dark Wheel, which is where the legend of Raxler comes from. It was the guy who wrote it, Robert Holdstock, put an awful lot of that. Basically, you had this game which was just wireframe graphics, but once you'd read the manual, because I don't know whether Holdstock also wrote the sort of background stuff in the manual or not, but he did write The Dark Wheel. But the two of them together, because the game came in a big box, it wasn't the sort of boxes games came in the 80s were generally just a cassette box, so they're just about the size of a tape. But Elite came in this big box, yeah. So it had
I'm sorry, the Elite box to me reminds me of kind of like when you buy an iPad. It looks like about that same size box, and when you open it, it's like the little compartments inside for the stuff.
Yeah, there's like it's not as big as because some of the backers got boxed versions of Elite Dangerous. It's not quite as big as that box, but it was big for a game at the time, and it had the novella, The Dark Wheel. It had the pilot's guide, the pilot's manual, and the disc or the tape, whatever, and it was all really well put together. It made the game, it made it more than the sum of its parts, as it were. When you actually started flying around in Elite, you weren't just shooting at wireframe graphics. You were now on kind of a flight of fancy. That the whole background that the Dark Wheel had painted behind this meant that it somehow seemed more than just what the graphics capabilities of the day would otherwise make you think. And it also kicked off kind of a tradition that's been going through all the Elite series. So the first version of the 8-bit Elites, they all, whatever platform it came up, because it was ported later on to the Commodore 64, which is probably how most people in the US, if they were around at the time, would have played it. It was ported to the Sinclair Spectrum, which was a very popular machine in the UK and in Spain. It was populated most popular 8-bit platforms. Later on, it got ported and enhanced. There was an Amiga version. There was a version for the Acorn Archimedes, basically the first computer that had an ARM processor, and it ran it really well. In fact, the Archimedes version was the first version where stuff happened that didn't involve the player. So you could see you could sort of walk in on a battle that was already in progress and that kind of thing. But so my love of this game really started there, because it wasn't just a game you just play, you know, like Space Invaders or whatever. It was a game that involved you could imagine yourself. You could write stories. In fact, we all did. We all wrote like fetid pieces of fan fiction about, you know, us being like these daring space pilots in the elite world and all this kind of stuff. And so I had many an English teacher at school who had to read through these essays. But yeah, it sort of, it also kind of, the thing I loved about it was it sort of, you know, you can't, in real life we can't be a space pilot or whatever, but it actually kind of, it almost fulfills that. And so it went on. I also played Frontier First Encounters a lot. And that was like, it was, when that came out, it had its problems. There was a long and very unfortunate interaction between, I can't remember, I think it was Game Tech, I think the company was called, the publisher, because Frontier at the time was a very young company. They didn't self-publish. And Frontier itself, and they had before that they'd released Frontier Elite 2, which I didn't play much. Because I didn't find it, funnily enough, I didn't find out about Frontier Elite 2 until they were about to release Frontier First Encounter. But I did have a pirate copy, yeah, which I played a bit. But then I saw, it was like there was a TV program reviewing games, and I saw Frontier First Encounters. I thought, wow, this looks amazing, because it was like FE2 enhanced. So I ran out to the shop and bought Frontier First Encounters, which also came with a book of short stories, and it also came out with the manual, which was more than just these are what keys you press, this is what you do on the joystick. It would actually sort of, the manual was written just like the original one. It was written in universe, right, with like lore ties and whatnot. And in the back of the manual was quite interesting, because it had reviews of all the ships. It basically had like a factual, as it were, sort of just a dry journalistic, this is what the ship is, this is what it does, this is some of its history. And then it had a commentary by Big Bob Isacati, who was a used ship salesman, who wrote sometimes really nice things and sometimes really rude things about the ships. Which I found was, I quite enjoyed reading that. That was I don't entirely agree with Big Bob Isacati on some of his reviews on Frontier First Encounter ships. But again, it was that the universe expanded. It had its Frontier First Encounters had its bugs. Most of those because there's in fact, we could probably go on for hours about the controversy between Game Tech and Frontier. So and everybody will get bored and switch off. So we won't. But it was released before it was ready, basically, and so it had a ton of bugs. But it was actually it's probably the first game I got patches over the internet. I was at university at the time, so I could download the patches, put them on a floppy disk, and stick them on my PC. I think that was kind of important. I think that was a formative event in the life of David Braben, and I think that you see that echo through time, and you see a lot of that present in David's decisions and how they handle both publishing their own stuff, and that they're not afraid to say, nope, this isn't ready yet, we're going to have to get back to you. And also Frontier as the UK's largest games publisher in their publishing of other people's intellectual property now, that they go out of their way to not be those guys. I think it was probably a defining moment for the company. I mean, the company at the time when they released FFE wasn't that big, but if you look at the credits on FFE, there's quite a lot of people involved. The funniest thing they had, I always want to know what happened to the actors. Because it was the days when CD-ROMs were new, and so everybody was like, "Gee, we got the CD-ROM now with 650 meg. We need to pack this out with full motion video and stuff." So they did. They got some. I guess they got some people from the local amateur dramatics in Cambridge and got them to record these short videos. Some of them are absolutely horrific, but other than them, they're showing some promise. And I'd love to know where some of these people who did the acting went. Some of them might have just been Frontier staffers. I'm not sure who they all were. But if you do if you poke around the internet, you can usually find these videos. And yes, they can be quite entertaining. The other great thing about Frontier Elite 2 and Frontier First Encounters, there were some really good soundtracks. There was some music composed by something called the Quality Quartet, which were original, because some of it was classical and some of it was originals. And sometimes when you're listening to live radio, you'll hear the FE2 intro music, probably played through some modern high-grade MIDI equipment, but it was some of the music the original music that came with these games was great as well. But the other thing is the FFE had really all the versions of Elite have, if there's been resources, have had some kind of story mission, as it were, involved. So
I mean, that one in particular had a whole living story all the way through it, where you had 5 different newspapers that could give you the news based on what you were doing, and then from the slant of the Federation, from the slant of the Empire, from the slant of the Alliance, from the slant of, there were 2 of them that were, one of them was, I think, more sort of
one was
like scientific-y, whatever,
Universal Scientific it was called, and
the other one was like a yellow journalist sort of
random intergalactic gossip, it was called.
The rag, it was literally rig, sorry, not rag, it was rig. But I mean, that shit is amazing, that the amount of detail and story and lore and narrative that was interwoven through that entire game was fucking incredible.
But that inspired us, because a few of us kept playing Frontier First Encounters long after it was sort of way into the early 2000s, as it were. There's a guy called John Jordan who reverse engineered it and did even more bug fixing and
some upgrades, some little
somebody else picked, because a lot of it was still in assembler, but assembly language when it was reverse engineered, but you had all the functions basically mapped out. And then there were other people who took it and added OpenGL support, so you got high resolution and you could use a 3D graphics card with it and all that kind of stuff. So, but we kept, the thing is, we had a thing called the EBBS, the Elite Bulletin Board System, which was like an old style web forum, threaded web forum. If you ever used Usenet, it was a bit like that. It was. But mostly what we discuss things, a bit like the subreddit. You think of it as the forerunner to our Elite Dangerous. It was some of it was just discussion between, a few friends who played the game. But the rest of it, we also started just doing this role play fan fiction stuff, and we had loads of fun with that. I mean, it does sound a bit nerdy, but we really enjoyed sort of mucking around with that. One of the big things, because there was like half a dozen of us doing these things, and as I said, because it made the universe kind of lent itself to that. So we had one of them was because the other thing we didn't expect was that Elite 4 was never going to come out. The Frontier had spoken about it, and they kept like kicking the can down the road, and they said, well, we're doing this other game called The Outsider. So we ran very fast and loose with the lore, because we weren't expecting an Elite 4, which is what Elite Dangerous is. So but we had like the whole long stories. One called the huge plasma accelerator saga, which went on for years and years and years. We just kept it never quite got. Eventually, I think we resolved it, but it was like you can find PDFs of the whole thing collected on the internet if you search for the HPA saga. But we wrote absolutely mountains of stuff, and I had a website, and I put some of my own stuff on the website just as like standalone stories, PDFs. And what else? Yes, other people sent me theirs to host, to host those stories. So I think they're probably still up there. I haven't looked in a while, but yeah.
So that covers your history sort of prior to. When did you first hear about Elite Dangerous?
I was at because the other thing I'm a horrendous nerd, really. I'm into computer preservation. In fact, I have currently in my workshop of some vintage Unix gear I'm working on right now. I've got this Sun Enterprise 250. I've just got the OS installed on it. Anyway, I was mucking around that stuff. It was an event because I'm involved with the Spanish retro computing group, and I was over in Spain, and it's the University of Saragossa, and I was just doing my usual. It was a bit quiet. It was between visits because what this event is, it's actually during the week. Most of these retro events are like on weekends, so all the old farts can come along on the weekend and play on the computers they used to have at home. But this one's kind of different. It's like all the schools. It's an educational thing. So all the local schools bring their kids in, and it's absolute chaos. And I was just sitting in between two school visits, just trying to catch my breath, because not only are you having to deal with all these God knows how many kids, you're also having to speak in a foreign language as well. So it really does take it out of you. Anyway, so I was just relaxing, and I saw something. I don't know what brought me to it, but there was something. Somebody said something about, it's probably on Facebook or something. Somebody said, "Oh, there's a Kickstarter for Elite 4. Frontier want to do it. They've been doing some skunk works, and they're only going to do it if this Kickstarter succeeds, because they want to prove that there's enough interest." It was like, what? And I was straight on the Kickstarter page. Within 30 seconds, I'd already put a pledge in. So I did whatever the backing level was for, I don't know, I can't remember the whatever backing level it was that you could name a station. So I was like straight in there, and I was wondering, and I was watching it at the day. This was day one of the Kickstarter. I was watching the thing tick up, and it was kind of a roller coaster ride. It shot up at first, and then it was like it went flat, and then like in the last 3 weeks, it was like all of a sudden, I think it got some more publicity. Somebody posted it on the BBC or something like that. And all of a sudden, more money. In fact, so much money came rolling in. They hit a stretch goal, which was to do the Mac OS version of Elite Dangerous. So yeah, I was right in there from the Kickstarter. So yeah.
Well, that's kind of how Kickstarters tend to go. They have a big push, and then it dies down a little bit, and then you have the successful ones. The unsuccessful ones, that plateau kind of sits, and it just collapses like a flan in the cupboard. But the successful ones, they rocket at the last like week and a half.
Yeah. It did have a really huge rally. I mean, they kind of met their target and then some. So it was like, wow, Elite 4 is actually going to get made.
Yeah, man.
It was like, wow.
So then you were there.
What will happen?
So then you were there from the very beginning of the Kickstarter all the way through the process. You were there for all of the early Lave radios with the Grant bathroom stories and
yes, which has been going on forever. Yeah,
and Faza and Alan Stroud and
I missed quite a lot of the early stuff though, because I got busy with other things, and so I never played any of the alphas. It wasn't until beta I actually installed the game. Also, at the time I didn't have a Windows PC either, so it was kind of on the back burner. But then what did I do? That's right. I had my only machine at the time, apart from all the vintage stuff, was my MacBook Pro. So I boot camped it, so I could have a Windows partition to install the beta, because and that's what I did. So I started with the beta on that, and that's when I actually got to play it for the first time. When it was still when you had. I think it was called the pill rather than the bubble. There was only a small area of space you could go.
Oh yeah, originally there was a really small area.
It was like Iranin and then half a dozen systems around it.
Yeah.
iBootis and a couple of others, which kind of I forget about, because I was always looking, because back in the Frontier First Encounters days, my role play, as it were, was always about the Alliance, which is now not so. I'm all about the Empire now.
You seem to be rather empirical.
Yeah, so although I have like a personal in-game, I have the in-game story for that. But
you're an Alioth boy. What ended up facing Akinar, huh?
Yeah. So, well, the idea in my in-universe family all came from Fector, which was an anarchy. Well, it's been an anarchy. It was in FE2, FFE, and at the start of Elite Dangerous, it was always an anarchy. So these characters, the entire family was a bunch of ne'er-do-wells, and not necessarily. Some of them were bad and some of them are good. So I basically invented this whole kind of family backstory kind of thing. And anyway, one of them ends up being in the stuff we did on the EBBS. One of them ends up being like ends up working for the Alliance, and then eventually starts climbing the ranks and becomes like a senior member of the sort of the Alliance's flight training crew, and while he's having to look after his nephew, who's a bit of a ne'er-do-well, who ends up going off the rails and all that. So we had some fun with this. This is all in the HPA saga. This all goes through. So anyway, that's how the story of my in-game story went. And then, of course, this is now Elite Dangerous is 50 years on. So it's not the same character. It's like the son of the same character who ended up being taken to I just mentioned that Iranin, the system where you started with in the beta. That's where his father went to escape justice because the Federation were after him. The Federation captured him, leaving his young son to be fostered by people there. So he never knew, and all this kind of stuff. So instead of that allowed the break, instead of just going back to the Alliance, to instead go off to the Empire instead, and join it was actually the East India Company which started me going there, because I was fully intending, I'd made my home at LHS 331, but then I heard about the East India Company right at its formation, and I thought, oh, that looks exciting. So I thought, I'd never actually even been in Imperial space in the game. I'd stayed sort of above Federal space, sort of in the Alliance area, because if you think how the space, you got the Alliance on top, the Feds in the middle, and the Empire at the bottom. And so I went down to Imperial space for the first time and joined the EIC, and it all started. So it was all kind of, it's the EIC's fault that I've ended up with the Empire.
So back in the early days, it was just a couple of guys selling weed outside of the trunk of a Type 9 from, what was it, Zelabara? Because you guys were out of Harvest Port. And then there was a whole thing where the drug empire of Zelabara was like, "Hey, man, we need some help with our weed business."
Yeah, that was kind of a bit late. That was actually a CG. I don't.
That was like November. That was November of 3301.
Yeah, I don't think we had any involvement in that happening, but Frontier had already given us, because Frontier had started with the PMFs, injecting PMFs at the time, and we asked, we've done all these things with Onion Head because we had we saw our home system at the start, before the PMFs were injected, was a sort of backwater system on Swankena or something it was called. It's HSUANQUENA. I think there's another player group there now. We also used to.
You guys had relocated at one point to Harvestport, and then from there
But we'd done all these things with Onion Head because we didn't like the feds, and it annoyed the feds. So we were mainly trading around Thosio and all those kind of places. Another player group's there now, which is even bigger than the IC. And so we did all this stuff around Harvestport, and when Frontier started injecting the PMFs, we said, "Hey, can you inject us into Kappa Fornacis?" And thinking it wouldn't happen, and they did it. They actually gave it us, which was brilliant.
Yeah,
because I guess they actually, our first operation, when I joined when this was just starting up. It was one of the really early CGs, and it was for a new Federation capital ship, which became the FNS Nevermore.
Mm-hmm.
And it was at BD. I can never remember the numbers. It was at BD something or other. This community goal was, and we actually had a big operation with a few other player groups to blockade it, to try and slow the feds down. And we had a brilliant time. So it was all small ships. No, very few people had an Anaconda. So it was generally Python. It was generally Cobras. I had my Cobra Mark 3. It was Vipers. Some people had Asps. In fact, I remember one of the guys in an Asp, I'd interdicted him and tried to blow him up and failed. And he was absolutely furious, and he kept chasing me around the system for like the rest of the night. But he's still playing. I see his name pop up from time to time. He's still playing. I think was Commander Stevie G.
Okay.
But yeah, I think I still see his name pop up on some of the Discords already. I haven't seen him in game, but I'm pretty sure he's still playing. But I keep remembering that. But yeah, we had like, it was a typical length CG, and we had a ton of fun just interdicting and battling and trying to slow the feds down, and they sent people to try and deal with us, and we had all code words because at the time there wasn't any of these squadrons, so you couldn't see, like, on the little info panel on the bottom left, you couldn't see EICO or anything like that. You just had to, if we saw someone new, we had a question for them, and if they answered right, we knew they were a friend, and if they said, what do you mean? Then we'd interdict them and blow them up.
Well, that's that's analogous to in the modern military. You have IFF signals that will show flat out, but like back in the day, like the 82nd Airborne, the Easy Company, from like the guys from Band of Brothers that they went through. Back in those days, they literally, when you were out on patrol, they would, if you came across somebody, because it's super, super awkward when you're in, sort of right on the front lines area. So if you're in Bastogne or here or there, if you came across somebody in the dark because you couldn't quite tell where they were and you didn't want to shoot in case it was a buddy of yours, you would say flash. And if you hear back thunder, that meant, okay, that's an American, don't shoot. If you hear back, wir haben sie, then light it up.
Yeah.
So it's very, very cool to see sort of a in-game version of that, or that actually, like literally, that's a World War II story. That story goes all the way back to the Bible. That goes back to Shibboleth, where the Israelites were like, all of the people, what were they? Ephraimites, if they would ask them, like, say Shibboleth. And because the Ephraimites said it, they pronounced it Sibboleth. And if you didn't say the right code word the right way back, then it was going to be a bad day for you.
Anyway, the back on that CG, the filthy stinking feds won. They got their or what we called the capital ship, because the CG was to deliver mountains and mountains of copper. So we called it the capital ship. Anyway, the FNS Nevermore was built, and then almost immediately it opened fire on the space station it was docked by. It was docked by Hudson Dock in BD, whatever it was. And something happened. It was obviously a bug in the game, but Galnet spun it really nicely. That probably, I know, a ship or something, you know how you always get stuff happening around stations, the security ends up firing on a pirate or something. A stray shot probably hit the FNS Nevermore, at which point it started shooting back and probably hit the station. So the station started shooting at the FNS Nevermore. Apparently the station got down to 26% hull before they managed to stop it. So we all had a good laugh. We all had a good laugh for that and spun it well. And then almost immediately we were into the Loo Wars, which was another absolute epic that everybody remembers well who was playing Elite Dangerous at the time. Again, it was very early. I think, I'm not sure whether even wings were in the game. It was around maybe 1.1. I think maybe wings were in by then. And the system Lugh, L-U-G-H, was basically the home of one of the first BGS groups, and they were trying to influence the BGS and see how it works. In fact, they actually sort of winkled out a lot of the bugs in the BGS doing this because things weren't happening when they should happen. So Frontier knew, because it was now getting a sort of a more wide testing than it was than you can ever do in the lab, because now you had a bunch of players at it and you had opposing players and what have you. So they got to a stage where they were giving the incumbent federal federal faction the old heave-ho. And this all turned into a player event, and Frontier put a bunch of community goals around it. So there were community goals supporting the rebels, and there were community goals supporting the Federation. And even to this day, it's controversial because the Feds end up losing. They won all the battles, because basically they won the battles, but they lost the war because one thing they neglected were the support missions, the trading ones. And of course, we in the East India Company do trading. And so we were like the trade force for this. So we did some battle as well, but we were mostly trade force. I had a Type 6 at the time, and I was like going in that thing continuously with supplies for the CG. There was a lot of saltiness from the Federation side, but you know, this is what happens when you ignore your supply lines. So they eventually won, but that, again, it was a great event. Most people were still in small ships, so any battles tended to be Cobras and Vipers and what have you like that. So the rebuys weren't too brutal if you blew up. And there's something fun about doing combat in those small ships. I love the Cobra Mark III. Funnily enough, more than the Viper's a better fighter on paper, but there's something about the Cobra I really like. So
the history of it, the Jameson of it all. Yeah,
the history of it all, and it especially when you put a VR headset. Because I got hold of a Oculus DK2,
nice.
And when I put that thing on the first time in the Cobra's cockpit, it was like, wow, because you don't realize that the scale of it really gives you a scale you just don't get on a 2D screen. So. And you can turn your head and you can look around and you can see all this other stuff because there's even on the head look on a regular screen, there's limits to how far you can turn. But in VR, you can turn around and look behind you, and you can see the little door that enters into the cockpit, and you can see how far away the co-pilot seat is from yours, and you realize that in the car, if you're sitting on a 2D, you don't really know how big it is, because it's difficult. It's always difficult to get. Everybody gives a lot of criticism for this, but it's generally difficult in space to get an idea of how big stuff is, because you're denied of your normal frames of reference. Even things like the Grand Canyon. People show you a picture of the Grand Canyon or a video of the Grand Canyon. They say the video or the pictures just don't do it justice. You can't tell how big. It doesn't look. It looks huge when you're there, and you've got kind of this. And in fact, the astronauts who went to the moon made the same thing. They said you can't tell if that thing over there is a boulder the size of a car or something much further away that's a boulder the size of a huge building. So you always have this problem with scale in space. but also, and 2D just makes that much harder. But when you stick the headset on, even the DK2, which was kind of not really all that high resolution, you look at the seat beside you and you realize that if you reached out, you wouldn't be able to touch it. It's actually further away than you think, and that the cockpit, the Cobra, is actually quite large.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's not it's not that large. It feels right. The other brilliant ship in VR is I had to immediately try the Eagle, because I love the nice thing about the Eagle is you can look out the window and you can see the wings, which I think is brilliant. But yeah, it's in fact I've been waffling now, haven't I? But yes, yeah.
Well, let's circle back to what you were saying about these events. And do you find yourself now sometimes with a sort of wistful sense of nostalgia and thinking to yourself, man, I hope that sense of like urgency and that feeling of the universe being sort of alive and vital, and there's stories happening and there's narrative and there's all of these events happening, which are then covered by the news sources and whatnot. Do you find yourself sort of hoping for a renaissance of that in Odyssey?
Oh yes, I do hope so. It's because it's what makes Elite more than the sum of its parts is all this backstory, and the fact that we who are playing it can actually influence this story to some degree also helps as well. I think just look at it, the stuff we've had before, like Colonia. I went on the Jaunt to Jax, which was the big. I went on the second wave. I was away as actually at one of these retro computing shows again. Actually, when I was back in time for the second wave, so I did that, and again that was that sort of started my love of doing these exploration expeditions, and they still of course keep coming up on EDSM, and I'm already signed up for another one later this year, which is another one done by Commander Yannick. It's like the Mercury 7 explorer.
Oh, yeah, you're right, yeah.
They're moving one of their fleet carriers out to one of the dark reaches of space. It's not Beagle Point, but it's sort of a little bit to the west of Beagle Point, so I'll be doing that later in the year. But I just love the you go and fly for a bit, and then you have a meet up, and you just have a bit of fun on a planet somewhere, and you kind of you have a Discord, and you show each other all the cool things you've seen as you've gone out there. But I mean,
looking at those events, looking at like the thing with the Nevermore, or even some events that are a little more controversial in nature, something like the Salome event or the Cone Sector Gnosis situation. I hesitate. I always want to call it the Cone Sector debacle, but then I feel like that gives it. I mean, it was to a certain extent, but even when you have players that are sort of creating a narrative and that are doing stuff, even if it's a huge thing that ends up landing badly, it's still a huge thing that people talk about for years and really gives you like a lot of sort of meat to dig into as a player and to create a real immersive world.
Yeah. I was never directly involved with the Salome event, but I love watching it unfold. Of course, I just had to laugh when Harry Potter was the one responsible for the gank in the end. It was like, I could kind of, you could kind of see that the trouble is anyone who trusts the SDC ends up getting burnt. And we've experienced that too. But it's like those events. The thing is, I can see that it's quite easy for Frontier to think, well, it looks, if it all goes horribly wrong, it looks really bad for us, etc., etc. But I think sometimes you have to be a bit brave and just do it. There are always going to be people who whine. You're never gonna satisfy all the Saltmeisters, and so you've got to realize that you're gonna make some people annoyed and just go ahead and do it, because the vast majority of people enjoy it for what it is. It's funny, I sent my alt account. I didn't quite trust the whole thing with the cone sector, so I sent my long-suffering alt account to go to the Gnosis, and he ended up sitting it out because there's not much you can do against a Thargoid in an unarmed dolphin.
Yeah, in an exploration build.
Yeah. Dolphin's a brilliant ship, by the way, for exploration.
Oh, and even better since January. They gave it that week that basically now you can be fuel scooping and then just jump to the next system. It won't overheat.
with my alt account, I did a really long expedition. It was one of Yannick's. It was the Orion expedition, and then back to back with that was the Eastern Promise, which was done by Commander Just Barely as a follow-up, because he'd been on Orion as well, wanted and said, hey, do you guys want to do a long journey home? So we did that, and that was on my alt account in the Dolphin. And the great thing about that, you can engage your fuel scoop while at the exclusion zone. And what you can do with the star, if you time it right, you can actually fly. You can almost touch the surface of the star. If you time it right, you'll go through the exclusion zone just as the countdown starts. Once the countdown starts, you can't be popped out of. You can't actually be popped out into normal space, and you fly straight through the exclusion zone, and you can. I tried to touch the surface. I could never quite do it, but you can get. And in fact, some jumps you can actually be full of fuel again by the time you actually leave.
Yeah, you know what that reminds me of? That reminds me of from Stargate Universe, where they had the ship Destiny, and it had to recharge its solar whatever. It's like power cells, and so the ship went into auto mode and just flew through the corona of a star, and it was like the tech was so good that its shields kept up, but it like you saw these massive sort of, whatever ion scoops opening up in every different thing and like lighting up as the ship was just like glowing with the heat as it flew right through the gas. It was incredible.
But the Dolphin's brilliant. So anyway,
good stuff. But you were saying about how, so like, because my feeling is, even with the complaints, even with the hassle, even with the whatever, if I'm an executive at Frontier Developments and I look back at the Gnosis event, I look back at the Salome event, I look back at many previous big events from the past, I have to say, overall, that's a huge net positive for engagement level, for the people that, being of interest. Now, even if you can manage to not, sort of step on your own dick, it's even a bigger win, because, you look at like the player engagement, even something of a much lesser sort of impact. But look at the Golconda event, the numbers of players and the amount of people enjoying the narrative and getting involved and doing all of the stuff or whatever. It's like, this, I understand Skeleton Crew. I understand we're working on the next big thing. I understand all of that, but I don't understand the point at which, from a corporate level, when they're planning out their plan, they say, okay, we're going to have, 10 guys be the Skeleton Crew keeping Elite going right now for the next year and a half. We're going to have 90 guys over here locked in this other room building this product that we're going to eventually call Odyssey. I don't understand the thought process where someone in a board meeting doesn't step up and say, hey, why don't we grab 3 other guys that we can add 3 guys to the payroll, or grab 3 from the 90 or something, where it's like, your job is keeping Galnet going. Your job is making, you two, your job is making interstellar initiatives. And really, that between, a couple of, or one guy doing all of that, like, that's not even a full-time situation. That's a situation where you could be doing that and still, with the rest of your time, be pitching in on fleet carriers or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, and certainly the interstellar initiatives, a lot of them I had the stuff around the Lave cluster, you know, the whole thing with the famine. I was hoping that was going to develop because that had some not heard of yet kind of terror group or piracy. Well, it's really a kind of out for revenge for what the Fed did to them from Capricornassus. I was hoping that was going to develop. Yeah, I was hoping that was going to develop because then you could have us in the EIC sort of clandestinely supporting them because, you know, the enemy of our enemy is our friend kind of thing. But yeah, it was. I was hoping that was going to develop a bit more.
It was interesting because the last message of that what we'll call the Rockforth Fertilizer saga, which was, you know, there was a multi-tiered interstellar initiative where it was like stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, and you were, you know, first investigating, going around to investigate, then you were doing combat against the side of Panem, then the last step was going around and delivering the agronomic treatments to the sort of affected areas. And the very last one of that, on the very last line of it had a little sort of teaser of like, yeah, and especially this area out in what was it called? Had a weird name. The system of blah 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 seems to be, you know, extra hard hit in their need for food. And then it was a commander, I think it was Malik, that off of that went there and looked and was like, hey, there's a generation ship here.
Yeah.
But you're right, there was more room for that story to play out with the side of Panem. Like they just kind of went like, hey, everybody look over there.
Yeah, I was hoping that was going to develop into, because that was another thing right early on, even before the EIC existed. I'd been in the there was an actual war in Capricornassus, that the whole thing between the Federation against the farmers.
Yep.
And so there are conflict zones around Panem and Panes, the planet and its moon, with the Federal Navy in there. And there were a ton of players, and I was always surprised how many players were playing for the filthy Feds. I mean, I got shot down. I was in that because it was like 1.0, and I thought I was like, you know, so cool in my E-rated Cobra. And then I remember I went in there in my E-rated Cobra, and this player ass turned and faced me, and this big sort of purple ball came out the front of his ship and hit me, and my ship exploded.
And that's when you found out about plasmas.
That's when I found out about plasmas, and also about A-rating modules is a good thing.
Yeah, man. Yeah, and that was a brilliant, because that was tied to a whole storyline. Yeah. That's a brilliant example of, you had actual events in game, but it was tied to a higher storyline that we couldn't sort of touch, but we could involve indirectly. And that higher storyline was that, you know, Zach Hudson had sort of maneuvered Jasmina Halsey into a position of having to like come out hard on the law and order side. She was trying to outright the right wing of that on that issue. And so she, you know, had said, yes, we're going to go ahead and do whatever. And then his buddy, that was the head of the admiral of the fleet in charge in the area, was like, okay, cool. Now we're going to X this up to like straight up, like, you know, carpet bombing people and murder and whatnot. And yeah, that was a brilliant mixture of how the narrative and the lore can come together with direct actions that you get to take as a player to craft the next sort of chapter of the story.
Yeah, it was yes, those days I remember fondly.
May they soon return.
Yes. And maybe with Odyssey they will. As I was saying earlier, Frontier do seem a lot more excited about Odyssey than they have of basically anything since before 1.0. They've rolled out, you know, we've got new dev diaries, we've got new live streams and stuff, which they haven't done for a while to such intensity. So yeah, it's nice. It's nice to see that. So the trouble is that once the hype train gets going, you see the usual cycle. People's expectations get higher and higher until they kind of reach a level which is like impossible for mere mortal software developers, and then but anyway, it's nice to see there is definite excitement, and we're just itching to show you this stuff again.
So fingers crossed, expectations low, hopes high, and move into this with a positive attitude. Yeah. Well, why don't we sort of circle around to Propter Lucrum Vincemus Stellus? Why don't we talk a little bit about your homeboys, the East India Company?
That means, by the way, translated, for profit we conquer the stars.
Yes.
We used to have a different motto, and I'm trying to remember what it is. I think it was just Sag-I Stellus, which is just follow the stars. But yeah, we went for more profitable thing. Well, the quite a lot of people probably have heard we're a bit quieter than we used to be. When we first formed, we were always self-promoting pretty damn hard, really. But the EI, as we mentioned earlier, it's been around for a while. I think, if my memory serves, we started in about March during 1.0, which would have been 2015, I think. Just trying to get my dates right, and we're one of the. There's a few groups like us which are still going, which started around then, but it all came out of, originally there was a group called Emperor's Grace, which was kind of more of an umbrella group, as it were. It's not to be confused with, if you fly around the Empire, you'll see there's such and such Emperor's Grace. Only one of those Emperor's Graces is actually associated with the original player faction, which I think is long gone. But the apparently, because this was before my time, there were a bunch of groups involved in the Emperor's Grace. One of them being the then East India Trading Company, which was part of it was like just a division, as it were, of this player group. Anyway, I wasn't privy to them. There were some disagreements, as there sometimes are, and they broke away and announced they were going independent and this, that, and the other. And there was a big post on Reddit, and I saw this. I thought, oh, let's check this out. This looks like a fun group to join. So I went to the website and joined it and all that. So this was probably in the first week or two of starting. So as we said earlier, the first big event, which was actually going on, which we got straight into, was this FNS Nevermore community goal, which we were blockading. Yeah, that would have been 1.1, because 1.1 was CGs. I think 1.2 was wings and 1.3 was power play. So we got going with that, and then the Lu War and all that kind of stuff. And we did things like, there was one of our members came up with something called the Galactic Silk Road, where he defined basically it was like a huge loop. You could fly around it in each way, and it was basically a list of commodities, the most profitable commodities between them. So you could just keep flying in this big loop around the bubble, and so it went pretty much everywhere.
That was a big money making thing at the time.
So yeah, and I remember doing it in the Type 7, being pirated and things like that. In fact, I got a wing. There's a wing of like three of us. We went round there, and we got pirated a few times. We went round this thing, but yeah, it was. We were doing things like that, and various Onion Head events, which of course netted us eventually our capital in Capricornassus.
There you go.
And we also started with the BGS quite early on. Once we'd got our home, I remember that first expansion. That was like, it took quite a long time. I think there were still bugs being worked out in the BGS. but it took us a while, and finally we got into expansion state, and we expanded somewhere. And then the system didn't tell you where you'd expanded, so we had to send out scouting parties to find out where we'd gone to.
Where are we? I don't know.
And we discovered actually nowhere, because due to not really a bug, but there was, you know how you can only expand into a system with, you know, it has to have less than whatever factions. Anyway, one of these couldn't be found, so we just didn't expand. Because we reported to Frontier. We said, you know, we'd scouted 300 odd systems within God knows how many light years. We haven't found where we've gone. Where have we gone, or did we expand at all? And they said, actually, yeah. So the next time around, I think we prepared a system, and we expanded into, it was some little tiny system. It was one of the LP 771-72, I think it was. It has like 2 outposts in it, and it was like, yay, wow, you know, it was like all this jubilation we had, because we actually expanded somewhere. We'd actually figured out how to expand. And then we started working BGS more and more, and we learned how to, one of our targets was LTT 1349, which is like, a lot of people use it as a home system now, because it was our first system with what was it? It was like a high-tech system, so it had good models and all that. So we worked to push the feds out of that system and take it for our own. So that was kind of one of our core systems, as it were. In fact, it's more our capital than our capital. It's usually where, well, until fleet carriers, it's usually where people get their ships, because it had decent outfitting and it has a tech broker, I think, or something like that. And
nice.
So yeah, we've used that system quite extensively. So yeah, as we sort of got, and ever since then we've basically done a lot of BGS work. We've also done other things. We had usually the kind of charitable things. It's usually because there's a member in particular who has a cause close to their heart. You know, like the whole situation with the Australian fires, for instance. So we had like a live streaming event for that. We did one for, I think, the Hurricane Harvey thing as well, in you know, where Houston got absolutely walloped, and a lot of people ended up sort of homeless with that. So yeah, we got quite a broad membership. So we sort of go in all sorts of, well, these days all different ways. And of course then the trading post, which is probably a lot of people will know us for the trading post. That was, in fact, our current chairman was a trading post customer, Commander Icarus Smith. In fact, it was me who met him, because he'd come for I think it's probably the first time he'd ever played an open. And this is the thing with the trading post, a lot of people haven't ever played with other players until they want to get an engineer unlock, and they see the trading post and they say, yeah, come on, yeah, we're an open play, come on and we'll bring you in and whatever. So a lot of people get it as their first experience. You know, people who might have only played in solo, or they might have played in open, they've just not really done, you know, winged up or anything like that. So, you know, because it's generally newer players who are looking for engineering unlocks.
Let's walk people through it. So for new players that are not familiar with the system, the idea of the trading post, the entire concept is, and just to sort of general terms, is you need X amount of certain specific goods to unlock this engineer, that engineer, this engineer, et cetera, and you guys provide an opportunity for a role-playing sort of experience, and B, instead of, I'm going to fly to this system where I can buy it, it only lets me buy 12, I need 45, so I'm going to go back and forth 4 times. You guys have it such that people would show up, they would, you know, go to the trading post and put in a request, and then they, you know, come into open. You would, you know, have a ship out there, and you guys would do a trade where, you know, they would pay you in a commodity, and you would take that and return the item that they need. Now, back in the early days, that commodity was Imperial slaves, which just to be very clear for anyone who's listening, who's like, whoa, slavery. Imperial slavery is not anything like slavery in the history of Earth. It's a whole different situation, and there's like a regulated system, and whether you're for it or against it, it's whatever. It's not based on race. It's a whole different thing. But you have transitioned, and you no longer accept imperial slaves as payment. You guys accept tritium now, yeah?
Yeah, I'm a little bit. I haven't been into the trading post for a while. The whole thing has changed a bit with fleet carriers because in the past, what we've done, we've had people's alt accounts who had ships called whales. So they're things like Type 9s, Imperial cutters. You load them. Basically, we have loading parties, all the rare goods that we trade. So like Avian brandy, what's the other one? Like Mitra cigars, all that kind of stuff. We load them into whales. Or we loaded them into whales, and then you meet somewhere in space. And you drop a load of stuff. We drop a load of stuff, and then the customer would drop whatever the payment was, and there'd be bits flying back and forth and what have you. It's changed a bit with carriers because we can, although you can't sell rares from a carrier, you can store them in your own carrier. So that's been quite helpful. That's quite a helpful thing to do because now you don't have to reserve. If you don't have an account with a ship reserved for nothing but storing stuff, because you can stick it in a carrier and then you can fly the ship for other things, or go get even more rares, and so you can use the carriers for deep storage for that. But there are other commodities. There are non-rares such as bromelites, which you can just sell for credits now. You can go mine them. We can have a mining party for bromolite. Stick them on a carrier and just. It's easy. You just sell it. So that makes it. Things have changed a little bit with the carriers. I unfortunately I don't do a lot with the trading post myself. I'm normally involved with the BGS group, which takes up pretty. The BGS can be, you'll know from doing turning the wheel, it can be quite time consuming.
Can it?
Yes, so especially these last couple of weeks, because we got into something like 5 wars simultaneously, which was that was hard work.
That is a lot. That's a lot.
We got into a lot of wars at once. It was one of those perfect stories. It's just how things sometimes line up. It used to be with the BGS that you could only be in one war at once, but now, of course, you can be in multiple wars, and once you're in. I know how many systems we're on now. I can have a quick look on eddb.io. Let me just have a quick fertile. Here we have factions. Name East India Company. Find minor factions. We are controlling 64 at the moment, and we have 157 assets. So once you've got that many systems, it gets kind of slippery and just random, because the BGS runs on player actions only. So just random players flying through space where EIC have systems or control assets, they cause stuff to happen, and eventually, and it can cause you can have unintended influence rises in places, or unintended influence for, and the real trouble is trying to separate this just from random actions from things that might be malicious, because sometimes you see like a huge influence gain on another faction, and you think, oh, somebody's working against us there, but it's not. It's just because that faction went into famine or something, or it's usually outbreak. An outbreak, medicines become tremendously profitable, and you get these wing missions to deliver medicines, which are tremendously profitable, and players sort of come across them and start doing them, and all of a sudden the faction that's in outbreak, suddenly their influence goes shooting up, and eventually you meet them in the middle and the war starts. But so we were stuck in several wars at once last week, and we managed to close them all out. I'm not sure, because some systems we don't care about, and we say, nah, just leave it be, we don't care. We have other systems, because again, there are lots of player factions. So we have we have an embassy. In fact, we have like an embassy channel now, Discord, and then a whole bunch of other embassies with player groups that are nearby. So we make sure we try not to step on each other's toes, as it were, with certain ones. So we got about 15 or 20 of those. Just flicking through the channel list here, and so the BGS, as your footprint goes up, becomes more and more slippery, and sometimes you just end up in situations you never intended, just because of the amount of systems you got into. So yeah, it's one of those things. And let's see, where are we in terms of size now? Yeah, we're still definitely in the top 20. I'm probably not gonna just go count them through, but yeah, that's basically what we get with the BGS. Is it gets busy. And probably one advantage you have with turning the wheel that we don't is that probably systems you've been to, you probably don't care about so much. So if a war starts there, not such a big deal. It used to be in the old BGS system that would mean that state that was a blocking state, but all those blocking states have now gone. So yeah, you probably don't care so much if one of your older systems that aren't particularly important to you are sort of falling into a war state or a lockdown or whatever. So yes, that is my brain dump on where we are with the BGS.
Right on. Well, I mean, being sort of that big of an entity requires obviously many people. So you as a fleet commander are one of the people in charge, but there are a legion of fleet commanders that then control various aspects of various areas, and then there are people that are working for those fleet commanders. Yeah,
we have fleet and wing. We have like the chairperson. We got two of those, Commander Vargix and Commander Icarus Smith. We have like half a dozen fleet commanders, and then we have another half a dozen or so wing commanders. And we've also got some elders, because of course as time goes on, people go on to new games or whatever, but they're kind of respected older members of our group, so they stay on Discord and they get their elder tags, which I always think of them. They're this like they all look like Gandalf the Grey,
a bunch of space pensioners.
Yes, half of them are probably only about 25, but yeah, I always think of them sort of looking a bit like Gandalf the Grey or something like that.
Back in my day, we only jumped 16 light years, and we liked it.
But the other thing is for things like player engagement, we have things like superhero tags. So if we get somebody who does an absolute ton of work, for instance, we've got after the serial wars we got Connor 11-22-3 and Lone Duck as superheroes for the hours and hours and hours they put in fighting wars. And we got like a top Mad Mags, the top trader. We've got a top K-Trucks, a top AX warrior, and that kind of thing. So we try and do things. We try and do things to kind of do a bit of player engagement. Another thing we have is like a role of like system. I can't remember what it's called now. Like system governor. That's it. So if somebody's done a lot of work preparing a particular system or working on it, then we'll give them like system governor tags in the Discord and that kind of thing. So it gives them their own piece of EIC space to what they got it for us, so they it's kind of like their system, as it were. So yeah, which has the added benefit for you guys of now that's his headache to keep it up. Yeah, well, exactly, yes. But it also, if you give people some goals to, because one of the things I find with games like Elite Dangerous is it's the whole thing with the open-ended game, the open-ended sort of game is that a lot of people, they mine diamonds or whatever, they get their anaconda and they think, well, what next? Things like the BGS and player groups, wherever you join, can give shape to your game. They can give you other things to shoot for. It doesn't matter if that you're as rich as creosote if you don't have like goals to shoot for a lot of players. I mean, some players just like farting around the universe, and a lot of people go out exploring things. But the one nice thing about a player group that works the BGS is it gives you things to push for that aren't just credits or the next ship or whatever. That the ship becomes the tool. It's a bit like you're going on about a while back about fleet carriers being the shovel. It's that kind of idea. Your ships are the tool you use to for political influence, as it were. It's how you expand whatever corporation or whatever we're a corporation, but some people are like anarchy groups and other people are like patronage, empire patronages and what have you. It gives you it puts shape into the game, so you don't have that. You have less of that question of, well, what do I do now? Well, you got something to do. You now put those tools to good use, kind of thing.
Sure. For a lot of games, for your World of Warcrafts or whatnot, it's like, well, my goal is I have to go rep up with this guy to get the hammer of blah blah blah, and I got to go get this guy to get the boots of blah blah blah, and I have to get my guy to level 80, and they just added a new thing, got to get him to level 90. I got to increase his hand-to-hand combat skill for this game, or I got this, whatever. So you have sort of built-in goals that you're trying to do. And for a lot of people with Elite, they sort of run out of goals because they tie their goals to just, I'm going to get money or I'm going to get this ship. And then once they do, they're like, okay, I guess I'm done. And it's like, there's so much universe here that if you embrace it, if you get into it with something like BGS or something like, it doesn't have to be BGS, it could be some hardcore exploration thing, or it could be some other thing of some other type. But like, if you embrace the not just super surface level goals, there is so much more to do in this game.
Yeah, and going back to Frontier First Encounters, with our attempts at probably some fairly amateur-written fan fiction, again, that gave us a goal and a reason to keep playing once you'd reached Elite or whatever big ship you wanted to get. And the same thing's true. The same thing's true, really, of Elite Dangerous. It gives you that there's a lot of content in there that I'm trying to think of a way to phrase it, that kind of it kind of comes out of having, they emerge from having some other goals and what have you.
Yeah, I mean, for Elite and Frontier First Encounter 2s, those were the first MMOs. It's just there weren't any other players. But in your head, there were. In your head, you were living in a fully fleshed out vital universe, and that ship that you just blew up was some guy that you ended because he messed with the wrong dude. It's just that now it actually can be that.
Yeah, I always say, actually, in Frontier First Encounters, I always liked it when you could take missions then which were similar to some of the ones in Elite Dangerous, where you take a mission to deliver something or deliver a passenger, and there'd be an NPC trying to stop you, and they'd always send it because there were fewer messages. FFE obviously didn't have quite as much space to put in God knows how many different messages, but you'd always get that. They'd always said before they came in, there wasn't really an interdiction. They'd just come and like intercept you in space, and they'd always send you the message, "You'll regret dealing with whoever it was." And it's like, "You'll regret dealing with David Braben," and then followed by, well, this wasn't how it was supposed to go.
Yes, and there's still a variation of that today in Elite Dangerous there is.
But it was always you'll regret dealing with whoever. So,
well, look, you make fun of them for having a limited number of messages, but I'll have you know that they were in the top 1% of all.
Yes.
I couldn't even do that with a straight face.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, I do find some of the messages, especially when you the ones you get when you're just sitting in a station, the random one pops up because an NPC is getting scanned by the police. Some of them sometimes can be quite amusing.
Yeah. You've got no right.
Yes.
Yeah. Good stuff. All right, so we've covered your history sort of with the game. We've covered the East India Trading Company. I want to get into Sag-I, but real quick first, I want to touch on your time as an inflatable host at Lave Radio. You've kind of been an alternate that we're in the room. There's a small room that a handful of us are in that it always comes up like, hey, we need a and I'm docking right now and I see, is this really necessary in the background? Yeah. There's a small room that a handful of us are in, and I'll hear, I'll see like, hey, we need an inflatable host. Can somebody pop in? And most of the time, I'm at work because England time, the nighttime is the middle of our day, or the evening is the middle of our day. So I'm just not able to do it 99% of the time. But then I'll see, you as one of the guys that's like, yeah, man, I'll be there. And you're fairly regular as an alternate in there.
It all actually kind of started a while back. There was a big battle between Lave Radio and some super salty people in the Alliance. I mean, super, super salty. And the thing is, this is an issue for us in the EIC because we need Lavian brandy. And every time Lave would go into lockdown, we'd usually, cause the thing is the Alliance was trying to curry our favor by storing it for us and then giving us, and Lave Radio crew were doing the same. So we usually managed to keep the stocks up because people are trying to curry our favors to get them to join their side or whatever. So there was all this stuff because the Alliance really wanted Lave back, and the Lave Radio crew didn't want to give it up so easily. So there was a bit of an event around that, and we had like some big public loading parties of Lavian brandy and all this kind of stuff that we did during the show and all that kind of stuff. And then later on, I thought, I was looking for an event to do in the EIC for as a player event, and I thought, hold on, we'd done this thing called Thanksgiving a couple of years ago.
Oh yeah,
it was like an event involving Onion Head, and I thought I should do Thanksgiving too. And although it got called Thanksgiving, actually I've got the sticker right here. It was Thanksgiving 3304. So it was around the US holiday of Thanksgiving where we actually launched. I think it was just before, like the Tuesday before. Because the idea was to do it in conjunction with, it was EIC in conjunction with Lave Radio Network. So the sticker actually says, I've got a bunch of, I made a bunch of stickers for people who went on the expedition. And the idea was to bring rares, mainly Onion Head, Tanmark Onion Head, Tanmark Tranquil Tea, and Lavian Brandy, up to Colonia, to Jack stations. Restock Jacks with the good stuff, basically.
So it was basically the jaunt to Jack's, but with a bunch of weed.
Yeah, and we took a different route because the idea, it was going to be a smuggling route. So instead of going up through the traditional the Colonia connection route, which was the original jaunt to Jack's route, we'd go and do this. We'd hop up high in the plane and go through like the neutron highway, because you always hit a bunch of neutron stars on the way to Colonia. If you go a bit off the plane, you're like about 1,000 light years off the plane. So anyway, we mapped this route out. The whole thing was, there was a big loading party which was done while Lave Radio was on the air. So I was on
with a bunch of people, and there was a big loading party. So we did a loading party at Capricorn-Asses, and we did a loading party at Lave. And then as the show ended, we were off. We sort of did a little mass jump with about a dozen ships to head off on our first waypoint. And so every week, as this went, it was like a 3-week expedition. I went on, did a little bit of an update. You know, this is where we are now. We've landed at. I gave all the waypoints a little bit of backstory. I named them after a smuggler. In fact, if I have a quick look, hopefully I won't start roboting again. If I have a quick look at EDSM and go back in time, it was a while ago now, 3304. I can give you a bit of the statistics of what happened. There we go. Still go. Wow, it's like 2 pages back now. I still haven't got to it. It's 2 pages. Oh, here we are. Thanksgiving 3304. So yeah, we had 6 waypoints. So Capricorn-Asses and Lave. So they're in the bubble, and then we had a bunch of others. Which I'd scouted a landing spot with my alt account, and this is about when the beta was running for Beyond, so they're going to change all the way the way the discovery scanners work. So I actually could use the beta to scan for geological sites, and some of them stayed. That there were some of them when we actually landed there in the main game weren't geological sites, but there were others where they were. Yeah, the re-roll on the Stellar Forge had rolled the same thing, as it were. So yes, we had I named the waypoints after smugglers. Like we had the first one was Mount Rattenbury after a smuggler called with that name, and we had George Quayle's Gulch, which was after George Quayle, he was a Manxman. He sort of played both sides of the law. He was like a judge and a politician, but in his sailing boat Peggy, which had cannons on. Why would a pleasure yacht need cannons? he was reputed to have been working both sides. So and then we had one about Jean Lafitte, who was a French bandit. We had my favorite was the story of William McCoy, who was an American blockade. He it was during Prohibition, and he was like an honest criminal. He took his ship up the coast of the US, and he would always sell honest goods, and he would never use violence. He was eventually shut down by the customs people. A customs cutter got him in the end, but. And he went to prison for his troubles. But I liked his story the best. In fact, for a long time I had a ship named after him, one of my EIC smuggling ships. But yeah, William McCoy was one of my favourite stories. So yeah, but we did that with Lave Radio, and so I was on there for 3, and I was on there for because the trouble is, our landing date when we actually got to Jack's was the day Beyond dropped, and nobody could log in. So basically, I spent the entire show trying to log in to do the final convoy into Jack's station. So it kind of ended up in a bit of a farce when we got there because of the usual. It was like, never do this on release day. But the trouble is, all this had been done the whole thing had been done months in advance, so I had no idea it was going to be a release date, but it was. But so I've been in the Lave Radio recording studio since, and there's a couple of other things I've done with them, but then it was like, our usual guest is stuck and can't come tonight. Would you like to be our emergency guest? And Airplane, the scene with the autopilot, the blow up autopilot. Well, that's the concept behind the inflatable guest is the blow up autopilot from Airplane. So yes,
Right.
I do enjoy. I think, oh great, they've asked me again. Excellent, because I do like the Lave Radio has a nice dynamic to it, I think, and so I do enjoy being the inflatable guest on that from time to time.
Yeah, it's good fun. It's good. It's definitely good fun. So let's transition into Sagittarius-Eye. Why don't you just? I'm just going to sit back and chill. You tell me about your history with Sagittarius-Eye all the way up to the transition to your current position, and you know what you sort of see going forward.
Okay, so well, I started with them as a writer. It was all to do with the Thanksgiving expedition because that was my first article for Sag-I. I wasn't with them then. It was a submission I sent in. I wrote the thing, submitted some pictures, and say, hey, would you like this? I kind of wrote it in universe. And actually, before that, I'd worked on something that Souverine ran for a short while, something called the Colonia Gazette. I think. Oh Souverine ran it. I did an article for them as well on mining because I'd been out there and there wasn't much in Colonia to do other than mine. So I'd been mining like anything, because it was just when Colonia was getting built out, and the mining missions, if you just mined and sold, it was pretty poor money. But if you took the missions, you could actually do quite well out of them. So I was taking the mission. So I wrote this article on mining, which is, I think it's still out there. I could probably Google it. But yeah, so that's basically how I started. I wrote that. I knew about Sag-I. I'd usually pick it up. I never had the time to read it cover to cover, but the artwork's brilliant, so I'd always flick through, see the artwork and all that, and read a couple of articles. And anyway, so I submitted the one about the Thanksgiving expedition, and Souverine says, I really like this. Do you want to come and write for us? So I said, yeah, sure. I mean, what do you want? He said, well, if you just one article every month or two, about 2,000 words. So I started doing that. So I've had an article. Ever since then, I've had an article in every edition since then. And then it was like, oh, do you want to be an editor as well? So, because he said, you seem to follow the style guide when you're writing. Would you like to be an editor? So actually, I hadn't even seen the style guide. It's just, I'd read bits of Sagittarius-Eye, so I knew kind of what it should look like. So I thought I just write in that style, you know. And so that's basically what I did. So anyway, I started doing editing, and then it was like I think in January, would you like to do the editorial? So I really enjoyed the writing of the editorial. It's only a short piece, but I just hit triple elite when I did that editorial in January. It's taken me a long time to get to triple elite for the amount of time I actually play, but the combat elite took a while. So I did a little short bit about, you know, why do we still do it? You know, it's not a pilot isn't, you know, piloting isn't something you do, it's something you are. So that's why you keep going after the triple elite, because it's like the fiber of your being. It's not, you know, it defines you. It's not like anyway. So that was my in-universe thing, and I had to quote John Gillespie Magee Jr.'s poem, the what's it called, the High Flight, I think it's called. It's always one for anybody who's into aviation. It was written in the 1930s or 40s, I think. Because the author was actually killed in the Second World War. But yeah, it was, and then anyway, that's basically how I got to where I am now. Go on.
Well, and you have recently accepted another promotional position within the organization. Let's talk about that.
There are some changes afoot. Sagittarius-Eye has been going on for about 3 or 4 years. It's been going on for a while, and
people just want to move on eventually. Sovereign's got some other projects he's into. You might have heard of. So you might have heard of the Cosmonaut, which is like Sagittarius-Eye, but for
Star Citizen. Yeah,
and there's also what Parallel Worlds, I think it is. The other one I haven't looked at. It's like a general science fiction publication, which I'm ashamed to say I haven't even looked at yet.
Well, I can tell you a little bit about it, as I'm on staff for Parallel Worlds. It's a monthly publication that has general sci-fi and gaming stuff. It is incredible, and you should definitely check it out, because there's sort of a collage of things there that are, there's stuff about, this game is coming out, here's a review. There's interviews with people about different aspects of sort of gaming and sci-fi culture. And then there's also things like, like original works of fiction. There's one from like 2 months ago that was an original work of fiction where I swear to God, it's not Elite. It's not set in the Elite Dangerous universe that we know of. There's nothing that's specifically said of like, Federation or Imperial space or whatever, but without being tied to any of the sort of touchstones of direct Elite Dangerous involvement, it is still, to my mind, the best sort of generation ship ghost story that I mean, in my head, it's set in the Elite universe, and it's an amazing story. Yeah. So yeah.
Yes, I must check. I wonder if they've got a podcast.
They do, in fact.
See, I love listening to this, because this is a great thing about podcasts. In fact, what I'm going to come to fairly shortly. One of the great things I love about podcasts is Elite Dangerous is a great game for listening to podcasts. In fact, it's because quite often you're doing the only time I don't listen to things like podcasts is when we're doing wars, because they're too noisy. You can't concentrate. It's not just the physical noise of stuff exploding around you. It's the noise in your brain as you're going selecting targets, whatever. And you realize the last 15 minutes of the podcast, it's just gone in one ear and out the other. So I generally don't listen to podcasts if I'm doing conflict zones. But yeah, the normal thing here, like I listened to Sony podcasts when I was mining for my my fleet carrier. And there was some really great. I listened to some really good stuff on the BBC as well. They had a absolutely brilliant series about people tunneling under the Berlin Wall, which I love that period from history. Articles about it. And so, all that kind of stuff. But I listen to things like Elite Week and Loose Screws and all the rest. Is when I'm just doing it. Like exploration missions are excellent for podcasts as well, because you can fly around scanning planets, and it makes the whole thing quite an enjoyable experience. So I do like the whole podcast format. And I think this is one, and this is what I'm getting to now, is that the thing is, after several years, the trouble is people are getting burned out a bit, and we're also in kind of a bit of a content lull with Elite Dangerous. So the trouble is we end up finding ourselves wanting for designers. Now, the designer for making the print, as it were, edition of Sagittarius-Eye is incredibly important, but also incredibly time-consuming role. I think generally the lead designer alone will put in 20 or 30 hours of work on Sag-I, which is quite a lot. I mean, it's the best part of a working week in their spare time doing this. And this is, in fact, why we went from monthly to 3 monthly, because it was too much work was falling on too few people. That's not to say that I as a writer and editor had it easy, because I'd write my one article a month, I'd go and edit a few, and then I was done. And then the back end of the process of that, the chief editor's job and the chief designer's job was absolute punishing. And so it was like there was big soul searching that went on quite recently after the last episode, because the last issue we published it got better, I think, with every edition, and it was quite a long one as well. We had quite a lot of articles in it, and it was like the design team was basically, they'd got a bit burnt out by this stage, and the lack of the sort of the chasm until we get to Odyssey, it was weighing hard. So the trouble is trying to say this without it sounding like a criticism of the people who have had enough, but they've done a great job over the last
absolutely
whatever years, and it wouldn't have happened without them. And the thing is, it's got to be fun. This is a volunteer effort. None of us are getting paid for it. So it has to, for people to want to continue, it has to be fun. And so the time of reckoning came. Do we just knock it all on its head and just say, okay, we'll go on. This is our last edition of Sag-I, at least, probably forever. But because the trouble is, once you stop something like this, it's really hard to get it started again.
Yeah.
So we spent quite a bit of time. This is probably why you think shouldn't there be another edition out just yet? But we did collectively soul search for a while. And I was saying, well, I would like to continue it. I still enjoy doing it. I enjoyed writing the articles and doing the edits and listening to. I love it because I always, even though I've read most of the articles by the time it comes out, I always listen to the podcast end to end, and I always go through the mag and all that. And he was saying, well, yeah, okay. Since you're enthusiastic for it, here, do you want to be chief editor? And it was like, oh.
I just messed up.
This is kind of terrifying. But yeah, we did this soul searching, and I thought, well, the thing is, I've got to find a way of doing it without burning myself out. Because Suverine told me basically how much time he spent on it, because he had not just the podcast and the videos, he also had the print edition to deal with. And so we all sort of had a think and said, well, why don't we, for now, it's the elephant in the room is, as it were, is trying to keep the print version going. One of the things we've noticed is we spend a load of work in it, but readership is going down. It's been on a downward trend since 2018 or something like that. On the other hand, we asked Peter Wotherspoon to have a look at the I think it was Peter Wotherspoon was looking at the podcast statistics, and they're going the other way. They're going up. More and more people are listening. And I think part of that is because the whole subscription model with podcasts is people get they get the notification whenever it comes into, they just queue it up and play it in their car, or it downloads their device automatically, whatever, and they just play it while they're playing the game or driving somewhere or on the train or whatever. So we came to the decision, well, what we should do, because the last podcast was also quite long. The edition was long, so the podcast was long. Instead of doing quarterly editions, what we'll do is we'll concentrate on keeping the podcast going and make it shortly, like maybe 4 or 5 articles, so about 45 minutes to an hour a go. And do it monthly. So we'll go back to a monthly, but with a less punishing schedule for the editors, because the other thing is while the designers and Suverine were sort of getting a bit tired of it, the podcasters were still very enthusiastic about it, so want to keep them on board and everything like that. So yeah, we go. We'll move to we'll move to a more frequent podcast edition, because that's the way people want it. They want something to listen to. They're not necessarily sitting and reading it from cover to cover, because that takes your full attention. But much as I lament that we don't have the capacity right now to do the print edition, because I always loved the artwork in it and the design.
It's
the
gorgeous.
layout is absolutely beautiful. It looked absolutely spot on. You can only do what you can do, and as I was saying, we're all volunteers, and people have to be having fun. They can't feel like it's a second job, and so rather than trying to browbeat anybody into being a designer, we'll concentrate on the stuff that people are finding fun, which is the podcast, and that the community in general, the players of Elite Dangerous, are enjoying listening to. So that's basically the direction we're going to go. I'll never say never. We've got Odyssey coming up. So in probably less than 6 months' time now. So was it January? So yeah, just about 5 months' time, which will probably stoke enthusiasm. So if there is somebody who is willing to bite off the huge chunk of work, which is being the head of design, we'd certainly look into doing the print style magazine again. So as I said, never say never, but it's got to be fun. It's got to be something that people are doing because they enjoy it, not because they feel it's a second job or it's an obligation or whatever. So that's where we stand now. So yes, so we're going forward with the podcast for now.
So on the one hand, you are keeping the institution going so that it doesn't close down. But even more than that, even above that, it's going to go, Sagittarius-Eye is going to go from being a thing that you get every quarter to now a thing that you get every month. Yeah. And I think that there's a lot of people that will be very excited and happy to see that transition, because I think there's a lot of people that would prefer, 4 issues 12 issues a year, each of them being, 45 minutes to an hour long, than 4 issues a year, each of them being 3 hours long. Even if it's a similar sort of amount of content, it just feels more of the time. It feels more sort of more direct and more immediate that way.
Yeah.
So that'll be good news. And I, as one of the members of the crew of Sagittarius-Eye, will get more stuff to do. So that'll be fun.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. Okay, because you do some of the voice acting for us. So yes.
Yeah. And now, in addition to the podcast, which has been a thing and has happened, you guys also have the YouTube page that has videos out, and that is continuing on as I understand it. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So,
and of course we can use the voice acted parts of the video as well. So that makes the, because I know I've done some video editing for myself, and that can be a lot of work too. I did some videos of multiple position. My dad's into motorcycle racing, so I did some videos of him racing a sidecar outfit in the Isle of Man, and that you'd record probably an hour and a half's footage for a 5-minute video. And of course, you've got to sit there and edit it all. It's probably not quite that severe with making a video to go with the podcast content. But even so, it takes quite a lot of work to do the video editing part. In fact, I think I keep thinking I should try my hand at this again, because the articles for this. For the upcoming edition, which will hopefully be the end of August, will involves a lot of combat zone things. And I was thinking I could do it in a video like this, that, and the other. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm just giving myself more work here. Honestly, and Suverine's right. I thought, how much work could it be if we're just doing a podcast? But I spent half the morning sort of fiddling around with stuff today on Sag-I. I was supposed to, because I've got 2 weeks off now, so I was supposed to, as of yesterday, I was supposed to spend some time doing it yesterday, but I got caught up in something else, which was supposed to take, maybe a morning, but ended up taking all day. So you know how it goes.
Oh, I know.
So it's it always seems to work out like that. Those jobs, those jobs that you always say, this job will take maybe an hour. 3 hours later, you're still at it. But yeah, so so I'm already started. I'm starting to feel the amount of work it potentially is. I'm still feeling my way with this whole chief editor thing I'm doing. So I'm trying to make it before I actually set the release date. I'm trying to make all my mistakes, because once I set the release date, that sets the monthly cadence. So if I say, okay, we're get everything recorded and we'll go live like August the 15th for argument's sake, which that's not going to happen. It's just a date. Yeah. Then the next one will be September the 15th. The next one October the 15th. So now I've got to try. I've got to be in a rhythm before that cadence starts, because otherwise I end up shooting myself in the foot. So I'm desperately trying not to shoot myself in the foot here.
Can I make a suggestion?
Go on. Yes.
Don't do it the end of August. If I could make a suggestion, do it like plan internally to have it wrapped up and done and fixed and like a product ready to release the end of August.
Yes.
And then release it September 1st. Because if you set that cadence of it's the first of the month and now everybody's excited, like, oh, first of the month, that's new Sag-I. The human brain is very well sort of accustomed to marking the first of the month as the time that you do stuff and whatever. And I just think that it would be a perfect opportunity for you to cash in on, like, hey man, this is a thing every on first of the month. I know there's a new Sag-I. I'm going to go looking for it. Make sure it's that extra little bit of free help, that free push. As you said, the podcast form lends itself very well to sort of auto downloads and auto this and auto that. But there are times where iTunes doesn't auto update, or Google Play drops an episode, or something happens and it just doesn't go through. And then if the first of the month comes around and you get 500 people going, hey man, I didn't get my thing, okay, there's an issue, I got to deal with this. As opposed to if it's we're going to do it around the 20th of every month, that kind of comes and goes without people sort of acknowledging it. And it may be that people don't notice that it hasn't come on their particular feed for 2 weeks, 3 weeks later.
When you were saying, don't do it at the end of August, I was thinking, what's Frontier told him? What's a huge announcement that Frontier are going to be making at the end of August that will eclipse?
Frontier is definitely making a huge announcement on August 29th, but that's a whole separate issue.
We should probably not release on the same day as because otherwise no one will hear about it because of Frontier's big news.
Yeah, I just like the idea of the first of the month, but that's just
the other thing people might not realize is how far in advance we have to work on this. Today, I'm already putting issue 28 is what's coming out. It will be the next one, but I'm already putting together the running order for issue 29. So. We start thinking, because the main, we've got the breaking news service, which is, as you expect, is breaking news. But the actual main magazine or podcast is generally not sort of up to date current affairs. It's usually it's magazine content basically. So we start quite a long way in advance. I think we would, certainly with the written edition, we were having to start something like 11 weeks in advance. With the writers would start writing, and then it has to move through this whole pipeline. I'm hoping I can shorten it a little bit with shorter, like a podcast of say 4 articles or so. We don't have to go quite that far in advance. As I said, we've only got certain number of writers and editors and people to do stuff. So this is why we got the lead time. But as I was saying, we do have a bit of a lead time for this. So even though number 28 isn't out, I'm already thinking of number 29 to try and get that ball rolling. So I'm trying to G up writers to see what they fancy doing. Because again, I want the writers to have fun. I want them to be right. I want them to be writing things they care about. I don't want to say you write this, you write that, you write the other. So I'm always, when I'm talking to, I've been talking to the writers saying, what do you fancy? Is there any particular articles you really fancy doing this month? So, we're trying to get Matt Lehman might be doing Turning the Wheel, for instance, and there's another guy doing another, and so on and so forth. Now, I'll probably do an article too, because I do enjoy the writing. So the trouble is I have to get somebody else to do the editing on mine. I can't really be the editor of my own articles, so so I have to kind of be hands off from that. But yeah, we do have to work fairly significantly in advance. So there's like a whole pipeline of stuff going on Trello at any one time. So since I've got some time off, I'm hoping I can finish with these. We got most things proofed again. As I say, it's a learning experience for me. So we got one article that's kind of it should have been proofed by now, but isn't quite, because I managed to miss my own deadline.
Well, you had that crazy work project.
Yeah. It's all right when the funny thing is you put these deadlines on the Trello cards and everybody meets them, and it's the chief editor who misses the deadline. It's not a good look. But yeah, I'm still kind of learning this role, and hopefully once I get into a rhythm, hopefully I can just things will go a bit smoother.
Oh, but, I'm sure they will.
There's always, there's always, again, as I was saying, it is something we're doing in our free time, and sometimes a writer commits to an article and real life happens, and there's nothing you can do about that. So you just have to accept, maybe we should knock this on the head and just, we'll do this next month instead, or whatever. So there's always that kind of stuff going on. So yes, it's a learning experience.
So give us the sneak peek, give us the little hint, give us something to get people excited of what's coming up in the future of Sagittarius-Eye. Give us a little teaser, just a little headline on an article or something that people will go like, ooh, I want to read that.
Okay, so how not to die as a mercenary in a conflict zone.
I dig it.
We have stations you haven't visited. In fact, it's a station you never want to visit, which could be one article. So
is this that one that's like 800,000 light seconds out or whatever, that you're like, oh Jesus, it might as well be Hutton?
Yeah, no, it's somewhat worse than that. You'll only go there if you have your collar felt, let's say.
Fair.
The old Nick, where the old Bill gets you. We've got Exploration 1, Voyages to the Galactic Limits, which is I took the first pass edit on that, and I really enjoyed that article. That was actually a submission from somebody who's not a Sag-I writer. Dropped that one in on us. So yeah, that I really enjoyed going through that article. I think everybody will like that, not just explorers.
Beautiful. Well, right now there's a renaissance of exploration with fleet carriers and the ability to stuff like the DSSA and people using them as sort of like way stations along the way when they can get out there. And so that's one aspect of it, but then there's an additional aspect of it of actually jumping into, like, for the first time, someone could get the data from the Anaconda graveyard, and there's so many other fringe systems like that where it's like first discoveries all over the place. It's a beautiful thing.
But this one has a absolutely beautiful part of the story about how it's like one of these extreme off the plane systems, and the lengths they had to go to get that and get back, because they didn't just self-destruct. So I really enjoyed that one. And we've also got one which is the one that's currently languishing a bit because I cocked up. That about we're looking at degenerate matter, so white dwarfs, neutron stars, black holes, that kind of thing. So non-sequence stars. It was going to be one article, but there was a bit. It was getting a bit broad, so we're sort of narrowing it down to the whole thing about degenerate matter. So you can read about some degeneracy. So yeah.
You mean other than in the news? Okay, all right.
Yes.
So all right, I think that's exciting. I think people have some interesting things to look forward to, and I personally am going to be watching the news like a hawk now to see if we get more stories about how is it Zach Hudson is an absolute dirty, filthy piece of Federation scum, and
then
course,
some Federation. What's to be expected?
Well, see, now that the news has been handed over from, I think Suverine has a little bit of a nod towards the Empire in him, but I think that his soul, I think that his soul really is much more Alioth based. But now that we've swung from an independent to whatever, I'm basically looking at you now like, is this going to be CNN News where they're just attacking the right? No, all kidding aside.
An organ of the Empire, yes.
All kidding aside, obviously Sag-I will remain a completely independent reporter of the news.
Oh, yes, fiercely so, yes.
Absolutely. Well, I for one, look forward to it.
In fact, I have to be kind of careful not to turn it into, because there are so many EIC-related articles I could actually write. It's like,
Well, just make yourself a deal as the chief editor. Make yourself a deal that you're allowed to write an EIC article, a slanted article, but then find a Federation and an Alliance sort of writer for that episode to or even if it doesn't have to be in that specific issue, it could be in the following one where you do we're planning out the next 2-month block or whatever of these 12 stories. Make sure that there's fair, balanced coverage. It's all good.
Yeah.
All right. So, guys, if you're listening to this, you're going to see in the show notes a link to the East India Trading Company, to the trading posts, and the Discord, where you can find all of the information about that. You're going to find information about Mack Winston, Mark Winston, if you happen to be Phoenix Defier of Lave Radio. And you're also going to find information, links on Sagittarius-Eye Magazine, the podcast, the website, and the YouTube page, because all of these are things that you need to be checking out. I'm going to say this. You can't, because you're, the chief editor now or whatever, but I'm going to say this for you. Sagittarius-Eye is the single most important and treasured and quality content creator as a group throughout the history of Elite Dangerous. If you play Elite Dangerous and you're like, what is this thing you're talking about? I haven't really heard it. Man, I'm not into newspapers. Dude, you are fucking missing out. The stories are amazing. And if you're that guy that you've never heard of it yet, I'm kind of jealous of you, because you've got 28 episodes. By the time you catch up, there'll be the 28th one will be out, end of August, sometime September, whatever. That are amazing stories. Everything from this conspiracy theory about the zombie Thargoids, that it's actually, the Thargoids have been co-opted by the Guardian AI, things about the different sites, all kinds of stories of political intrigue, amazing stuff, articles on the Diamond Frogs and different player groups and all the stuff that happened in Jotunheim and different areas, races, amazing, silly, crazy, weird shit, some tinfoil hat shit, like that guy that was talking about, I know about the club. I'm reporting from the closet of my ship somewhere in the dark end of a fucking distant nebula so that they can't find me, and I've covered my head in tinfoil so that the signals won't get out. And weird, funny shit like, hey, what is the story about the Type 8? What happened to that? Just all of those things that I just named to you off the top of my head, they are all super well written, super interesting. You know, just Primetime Casual and an article on his ship, the Fat Bottom Girl, his crazy hooning adventures in an amazing little hauler, and like just it will enrich your experience in all of Elite Dangerous. It will give you so many different paths to look up stuff, dude. There is a secret human-made AI that was part of Project Thunderchild that is right now in 3306 wandering somewhere in the galaxy that it has a mission to try to help us to fight against the Thargoids. There is all kinds of shit that I pray to God many of these threads will lead to what's coming in Odyssey or whatever, but even if they don't, just the richness of the story of the galaxy of Elite Dangerous. If you haven't checked out Sagittarius-Eye, and if you hadn't listened to every one of the podcasts at least once or twice, you're only half informed on what the game is. So if you find that, like, hey man, I just like buckyball racing, I don't give a shit about the story, okay, that's a choice, whatever. But if you're like me, and if you're like the kind of people that generally listen to my podcast where they're like, man, I'm interested in the story, I'm interested in this, I'm interested in that, let me tell you, if a new podcast drops on the same day and it's Elite Week and Sagittarius-Eye Magazine, fucking wait on Elite Week. Go listen to Sagittarius-Eye first, because it is the absolute best. All right, I'm done with my little rant.
Thank you.
No worries. All right, Mac, it's been lovely having you in. I'm going to edit this one all up and we'll get it posted for people to listen to Monday. And I hope that this little this little talk serves to point people in the direction of Sag-I, because I want to see this explode. I want to see, I mean, the numbers of Sag-I podcasts are already great, but I want to see them go by tenfold. And we need to make a concerted effort. There needs to be an effort on the part of all pilots. If you're hearing this now, there's a ton of new people that are going to be filtering into this game over the next 6 months. You need to make sure that you put this in their face and say, hey man, there's this thing. You might not have heard about it. You need to go check it out. Sagittarius-Eye Magazine. All right, Mac, thank you so much, and have a great day, everybody.
Yeah. According to scientists, Uranus is full of methane gas.
I think you're right, though, Colin.